All right, great. Let's talk about knitting a scarf. Um, we're gonna need needles. We're gonna need yarn. Needles for something kind of cozy. I like to go with 10 millimeter needle, which is also called a 15. I don't know why it's called a 15. You're gonna want yarn to match. Um, so this is number 6 yarn, super bulky. You'll see it's also specifying that you would want size 15 needle or 10 millimeter needle to work with. This is 130 yards of 6 ounce. That's probably what the 6 is. 6 ounce yarn. This is an acrylic alpaca mix. Acrylic is a synthetic material. Alpaca obviously is natural, so the alpaca in there makes it quite a bit softer. Great. So we've got our yarn, we've got our needles. Now we need to get the yarn onto the needles so that we can start working towards having a scarf. Or whatever you're knitting. I'm knitting a scarf. So, we're going to take our yarn and we need to make a slip knot. So to do that, we'll go, probably 7 or 8 inches in from the end, and we're going to make a loop where we have the tail end going over the end that's connected back to the ball of yarn. So once we have that loop, we're going to put that loop over the tail end. So our tail end's coming out here, our loop is over the tail end. We're just going to pull that tail end through the loop, like that. It's called a slip knot because you can slip it right out, but that'll be important later. So we'll do that again. So we'll go, 7 or 8 inches in, make our loop, the tail end over the end that goes to the yarn, and put the tail end loop through the other loop. Great. So we've got this loop, we've got our needle, we're going to put the needle through the loop. Wonderful. However, it's all loosey-goosey, sliding around, so what we can do is take the two sides of the yarn here, kind of our tail end, tail end, and then the end that goes towards the ball of yarn, and we can pull both of those, and that'll snug it right up to the needle. And that is our first stitch. So we're looking at that. However, we don't want just a single stitch width for our scarf, so we're going to want to make it a little bit wider. To make it a bit wider, we can kind of make like a, like pointer, like gun shape, I guess, with our left hand here, and I'm holding this in the right, and we can loop around. We don't want this tail end. We want the end that's connected to the ball of yarn. Loop around that like this, and then kind of twist like that. Again, so that's going behind and twisting, and so that kind of makes another loop just like that, which we can slide the needle right on through and snug it tight, and that's our second stitch. So we're going to do this for the width that we want of the scarf. So I've made scarves that are like this wide, and then I haven't really made narrower ones. I think I'm going to make one that's a little bit narrower this time. Maybe only maybe a 10 stitch wide scarf or so. So another loop on there, another loop on there. And so as we're casting on here, you can kind of see the width start to form. And this again, this is really emphasizing the utility of the kind of bulkier yarn. So we're six stitches in here, and we're already like 1.5 inches wide. If we're using a super narrow yarn, that would we would not be nearly as far along. So we'll keep going there. Think about how wide we want this to be. Go a little bit wider than that. All right, let's see what we got there. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14 stitch wide. That seems like a good width to me. So we're gonna go with that. So now we have all our stitches cast on. I actually dropped it to 13. I wanted to go a little bit narrower than than I had on there. We're gonna switch this needle from the left or the right hand to the left hand. Then we'll take our open needle, empty needle, in the other hand, and now is when we're actually going to start knitting. Not that we weren't before, but we're actually going to add knit stitches in to what we're doing here. Just yeah, kind of not bunch everything up, but kind of move everything up towards the tip of the needle here, and we're going to. There we go. Take our needle. It's going to go right in through this gap here between the first and second stitch, and poke out of this hole here, so you can kind of see where it's going, right through there, and it goes up through there, and then with this kind of at the end that goes back to the yarn, we're going to loop from the back around the front of that needle. And then the last step of this, or the next step of the stitch, we're going to kind of slide this along here. We can see that right in here, go back through that gap and slide the needle off, or slide the stitch to the other needle. So we'll do that a few more times here, definitely. We go behind the stitch, through that hole, around the back and forward, and then we're catching that yarn that we brought around the back. You see that it's right in there? We're catching that and sliding it off. Do it again. Once you kind of get going with this, it becomes pretty quick, but it's not quite there yet. So, again, we got about half on each side here. We're kind of holding this in a couple, the tail fingers of one hand. We'll catch our stitch, go up through, round the back, and this right here is what we're catching when we come through here. So we're making sure that that's right there is what we brought around the back, and we're sliding this onto the other needle. And we'll see that once we do that for all of the stitches from the left needle, they will be transferred over to the right needle. Two more here. One and two. There we go. And you can see now it looks similar to as it did when we had just cast on. However, there's now a little bit more length hanging off of the needle. And that length will continue to increase as you stitch more and more rows. And so we will transition over here to the next side and begin our second row. So as we start the second row, it's really going to be just like the first one we did. So we'll take that tail end in our kind of last two fingers there and start working our way up the needle. So we'll take the first stitch. You can see again we're going through that opening there that we had, or it's right between the first and second stitch. Needle starts there, slides underneath the first one there, right needle behind the left needle. Our tail goes around from back to front, and that's around back to front. And we're catching that right there. That overlap right there is what we want to catch. Right there. And then we're sliding the stitch off to the right needle. And we'll continue to do that for this whole row. So we'll go in, around from back to front, slide back, catch the loop right there, come forward and slide the stitch off to the right needle. And you kind of have to slide this up the needle as you go, so we can see if we do a bunch of stitches here and don't slide it up, it starts getting really difficult to get this off the end there. So you gotta kind of keep sliding them up the left needle there, and making sure it doesn't get too far from the tip. Otherwise it'll get really difficult to get it off the end. And I think make some kind of longer sections in the yarn that will make loose sections in your scarf that you don't necessarily want. We'll keep going here until we get this row done. 3 more stitches. And the last stitch we'll go through. Again, that's just, we have that loop that's on the end, so we'll just go through it, and then around, and back, and slide it off to the other needle. Just kind of snug that up there, and there we go. You can see now we've got even more length coming off the needle there, and that's the beginning of our scarf right there. And we switch needle. So the needle in your left hand is always going to be the needle that has the tail end to it. Needle in your right is your working needle, is the one that starts blank, but will get some length to it. So we'll add a little more yarn from our ball o' yarn there. Alright, and we can continue with the next row. So we'll take our yarn with our tail end there and start stitching the next row. There we go. And we continue on.